It is officially secret scrimmage season, Brad. I know that's a very exciting time for you. Welcome back into the CBB Central podcast. I'm Kevin Sweeney, along with my co-host, Brad Cavallero, and we are excited because it is very, very close to college basketball season, Brad. A lot of secret scrimmage results coming through the pipeline, and we'll get to those in just a minute before we do our big mid-major preview episode. We're going to touch on a lot of the A-10, a lot of the Mountain West, some Missouri Valley, WCC, and Gonzaga especially, and then hit on as many of these good mid-majors throughout the one bid leagues we can. But let's first touch, Brad, on more serious note. Jontay Porter tears his ACL and MCL in a scrimmage against Southern Illinois this week. Seems like every year there's one or two really bad injuries in a secret scrimmage or in a little in some sort of practice that just crush a team. And this one's one of them. I mean, this destroys Missouri.
Yeah, I was saying to you a little bit off air, I think Missouri is probably the worst team in the SEC now. I mean, this team's strength with its front court and specifically Porter, Puryear, and Tillman. Porter being the best one of the bunch. You know, he can space the floor. He does all the little things, block shots, defends. That is an enormous loss. And now I think, you know, when you stack up Missouri to that bottom tier in the SEC, I think I might even take, you know, the Georgias, the Ole Miss, definitely like a Texas A&M over Missouri right now.
Yeah, I would be very low on Missouri right now. I just don't see like their whole problem was we don't have enough offense to really score. Jontay was not only going to be probably their leading scorer, but he might have led that team in assists. Like, he's a really good passer. They're just going to miss him so much. I mean, it stinks for him given his NBA draft stock. Question is, will we ever see him in college again? I don't know if he comes back for one more year and tries to rehabilitate his draft stock, but it's just a brutal injury on all fronts. And certainly you never want to see.
Absolutely. And then in terms of the secret scrimmage results, you know, we've seen a few kind of surprising ones earlier today. We had URI beat St. John's, and I'm actually a little higher on URI than most people. I like their kind of big three of Doughton, Russell, and Langevin. A lot of question marks with the freshmen who were kind of sub 150 ranked, but it was very surprising for them to beat St. John's. I saw Mustafa Heron was like 1 for 10. I still would take St. John's ahead of URI coming into the season. I still think that St. John's has top 25 potential, but I think this could speak more to URI kind of remaining a factor at the top of the conference.
Yeah, I would completely agree. I mean, I was someone who said it was very wrong to suggest URI could be a top 5 team in the A-10 in your preseason poll. I kind of am going to hedge a little bit on that. Jeff Dowden was excellent based on the box score tweeted out by a few of the media types. Dowden had 22 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. Langevin had 23 points and 10 rebounds. And then Fats Russell had 12 points and 6 assists on 5 of 18 shooting. I mean, it is tough to take away a lot from any one single game in college basketball, especially one that doesn't count. But my favorite takeaway from this was looking down at the bottom and where that there was 5 technical fouls in the secret scrimmage. Tyrese Martin got 2 techs, so he was ejected. Fats Russell got teed up, and Figueroa and Sidi Kita were both teed up for St. John's. So chippy secret scrimmage. Iowa State and Nebraska split 2 halves. I don't know how much you take away from that. Just a few more we can run off here. Nevada got blown out today by Washington in Reno. That's certainly surprising.
That was a charity scrimmage, so the fans were there for that one.
That is not good for Nevada early. Their defense did not look good in a game where they could have kind of displayed that. St. Mary's beat Stanford 43 from Jordan Ford. Harvard nearly beat BC without Seth Towns and Bryce Aiken. That's pretty impressive. Creighton nearly beat Minnesota. That's surprising. Villanova played a 50-minute scrimmage with UNC, and Phil Booth went for 41. And Villanova won that game by about 10. So a lot of different intriguing results. Once again, we kind of have to take these with a touch of with a grain of salt to a degree, but at the same time, you can take away some things, and especially in a time when we're starved for any news, it's always interesting to break down as much as we can.
Yeah, so a few takeaways for me. I'm pretty sure I read in the Nevada-Washington game that Noah Dickerson didn't even play.
He did not play.
So I think that this is going to be a good thing for Nevada, and specifically its fans. I think this is a nice little reality check that it's not going to be as smooth sailing, or like there's a possibility that the season's not going to be as, I think that they have the expectation that it's going to be like whatever 36-3, Final Four, but I think that this at least is kind of broaching the possibility that it's not going to be all roses here. And then in terms of the Minnesota and Creighton, I was very intrigued by the starting lineups for both teams, where Creighton went with Crumpel at the 4 and Epperson at the 5, with Connor Cashaw off the bench. Creighton doesn't usually play two kind of true centers like that together. I mean, Crumpel can play the 4, but the bigs that they've used at the 4, who are more of like your traditional big, they've been like floor spacers, like a Toby Hegner. Ethan Raggi played a lot of 5 as that kind of floor spacer, but now they're going kind of adjusting to their roster specifications here, going with Crumpel and Epperson. And then Minnesota, they went with, I guess, Amir Coffey at point guard. They brought Stull and Isaiah Washington off the bench. Gave Gabe Kalasher a start. He's like a 3-star freshman who can shoot it. So that's a few interesting lineup takeaways here. And then also with Villanova, I believe I saw that Sadiq Bey was their leading scorer. He's a guy who a lot of people thought was going to redshirt. He was a late add. He's lower ranked than Swider. Samuels, the sophomore who barely played last year, and then Brandon Slater. Looks like maybe Sadiq Bey could be in line for a spot in that rotation.
Yeah, it is. I was a little surprised to see Bey play. I do always love when you get a full box score instead of just a list of stats. It does give you a little bit of insight as to a starting lineup, potentially as to how many minutes guys are playing. With the St. John's game, you could tell that St. John's played with guys and Rhodey plays with guys for like 30 minutes. In the Minnesota Creighton game, the minutes were a lot more evenly distributed, where like no one for Minnesota played over 25 minutes. Only one player played over 20. Only 2 players played over 25 minutes for Creighton, in Ballack and Tyshawn Alexander. Alexander had 15 in that game. Sam Froling had 16 had 13 points in 16 minutes. Excuse me. That's intriguing if you're a Creighton fan. And Damian Jefferson also had 7 off the bench. I don't think Creighton's going to be as bad as we might have thought. I think it's going to be pretty interesting to watch.
I still think that Creighton's going to be pretty low. I still am going to stick with them as 9th in the Big East, and kind of that 90-ish range nationally. I just think that they're probably a year away. I mean, they're only going to lose Connor Cashaw, Ballack and Alexander and Mintz and Epperson. All these guys who are starting this year will be back. They gotta be able to use the experience that they gained this year and kind of make a climb up the Big East next season. But I just don't think that they have as much talent, even as like Butler and Georgetown and stuff. I think that they're just a little too young right now.
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't necessarily think they could make the NCAA tournament. I just think they'll be good enough to be like a clear NIT team, like hang around, maybe pull a couple upsets you wouldn't expect. I would say that's kind of my Creighton expectation.
Are we good to move on to mid-major talk?
Yeah, let's do it because it's going to take us a lot of time to get through all of this, I'm sure, because we are such chatty people about all 353 Division I basketball teams with the additions of North Alabama and Cal Baptist. Let's start it off with the A-10. And Brad, it's a year in the A-10. I think the league is a lot deeper than it was last season, but I don't know that there's a team in there that will even be as good as St. Bonaventure was last year. So it's hard for me because I don't see a clear at-large level team in this mix, but it still feels weird with the depth this league has to only get one bid. Kind of what are your thoughts on that, and who do you like to win this league?
Yeah, so I think that the middle of this league Actually, I would even extend that down to that bottom tier minus Fordham. I think that one through 13. But let me rephrase this one more time. I think that kind of bottom tier is better. I think the middle is much better, and I think the top is going to be a little worse. I don't think any of these teams are as good as URI was last year, but I think that St. Louis could be as good as Davidson and Bonaventure last year. George Mason, they return everyone. They could be in the mix. We've touched on a few times that they have this insane jump that they would need to make, going from like a Ken Palm 220th team, up to be an at-large team, you got to be a top 48 team. So that's an enormous jump. I think URI is a little better than people expect. St. Joe's, if Brown and Kimball are healthy, could be solid. And then VCU, if Marcus Evans is healthy, I think that they'll be in the mix for like an NIT caliber team right there. And then you can touch on the other kind of half of the relevant teams there in the A10.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sneaky excited about Dayton. I think they could surprise some people. I mean, Anthony Grant has to prove it. I fully understand that, but when you have Josh Cunningham, you have a trio of young guys in Jalen Crutcher and Jordan Davis and Trey Landers who showed some things last year, and then you also add in a really good freshman class featuring a guy like Dwayne Cohill is a 4-star recruit, and Frankie Policelli, who had multiple high major offers. I think they're going to be really interesting. I like UMass a lot. I think UMass could make some noise. So it's gonna be a really fun. I think like 1 through 8. I think 1 through 10 has a chance to. I mean, I'm not going to say like I don't think St. Bonaventure could win the league, but I think like. I think everyone from 1 through 10 has a legit case to be in the top 4 and a legit case to be in the bottom 5 through 10, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I think one extremely interesting team that looks to be outside of that top 10 is LaSalle, because they get David Beatty off a waiver. They have Tracy Carter, the Marquette transfer, who started as a point guard as a freshman on that team with Henry Ellenson. And they have Pookie Powell, who's back. So they have a lot of guards. The questions for LaSalle revolve around the front court. There's very little proven commodities in that front court. But I mean, they have some pretty underrated guards there. I still have them 11th in the conference. And then one team that we haven't touched on yet is Davidson. I'm not super high on this Davidson team. I know a lot of people have them as an at-large caliber team. I have them all the way down to 8th. I think they have these 2 great guards in Axel and Kellen Grady, but the rest of that roster I think is really lacking.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I don't think this team is. I think this team could easily be in the top 5, but I don't think this is like a favorite. I have them 5th in my A10 rankings. I mean, Grady's really good, and as you said, John Axel Goodmanson is really solid. I think one of the more underrated players, but they lose Peyton Aldrich. Excuse me, not Peyton Henson. They lose Peyton Aldrich, and there's no replacement on the roster for him. And I think people are just kind of forgetting about that he was like a 21-8 guy who shot the ball extremely well and made plays in the post and in the high post. I mean, he was really impressive to me. I think St. Louis is the clearly most talented roster in this group, and just concern for me is the spacing. I mean, they're so built around a front court. And their guards aren't great shooters. Tremaine Isabel is an average shooter. Jordan Goodwin can't shoot the ball right now. Dion Wiley is going to be asked to space the floor and be really important. I mean, Dion Wiley might be the most important role player in mid-major basketball this year.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, I'm a big fan of St. Louis's front court with Hassan French especially. He's like a active like rebounder kind of power forward type who could see some time at small ball 5. But going back to Davidson, I think a lot of people are just expecting kind of like a next man up sort of thing. With these programs like the Belmonts of the world, or like the Wisconsins of the world, where so often they have just reloaded. I think people sometimes take that for granted. Like I've said this a few times on the podcast, but I don't mind if someone has Davidson high up and they say, I think Davidson is going to be is going to be the top team in the A10 because they're always good, and I think Keyshawn Pritchett is going to have a breakout year. I'm a real big Nathan Ekwу guy. Grady's going to be a first round draft. Like you need to have reasons. I just hate when people say, oh, I mean, they're always going to be good, so they'll be good again. I mean, look, people use that logic with Wisconsin last year. People used it with Iowa State, and both teams, fell considerably based on unwarranted preseason expectations. I can see Davidson falling into the middle of the league this year, as people kind of diminish the loss of Aldridge, as you mentioned earlier.
I will highlight one guy for Davidson who I think could be pretty good, and that's Luke Frampton. He missed last year. I think he had an ACL. It was either an ACL or an Achilles, if I recall correctly. He was a guy who came in really highly touted, not quite as highly as Grady, but he was a 3-star recruit. Had a bunch of guys, a bunch of programs interested. I know Arizona was looking around at him at one point. The West Virginia natives. So I think he could be that third. I'm not a huge Keyshawn Pritchard's going to be a breakout guy, but Bob McKillop said that his expectations for Luke Frampton were about as high as they were for Kellen Grady's last season before Frampton wound up getting injured. So he's definitely a guy who could change the game for them and help them boost up into the top 4. I haven't seen a lot of talk about him, which is kind of odd given how talented he is. I had assumed he was going to be the guy who replaces them by being that third scorer next to Goodmanson and Kellen Grady. There's been a lot of talk about him, but he's a really underrated prospect who could be really good for this team.
The thing is, I mean, Frampton could have this breakout season. That would certainly not surprise me. But every fan base has their guy. The guy who no one knows this team really except for us fans. We know that player X is going to have a breakout year, and sometimes they're exactly right, and other times it's all forgotten by a season's end, and they're trying to run the player out of town.
Classic stuff.
See UConn with Quentin Williams, Providence a little bit with Ricky Council. I remember hearing reports that Council was playing so well at practice, maybe he's going to start. All these people think because he had a poor freshman year, he's not going to play, and I don't even think he got a meaningful minute the entire season. And then with Quentin Williams, same thing. People why don't people think Quentin Williams is going to be better? He's this amazing athlete. He's going to be our starting power forward. Yada yada yada. Fast forward a few months, and people want him to give up his scholarship.
Yeah, I mean, fans talk themselves into players and then talk themselves out of players faster than 3 games in. It's all right,
yeah.
Let's run them off. It's over. Who's your pick in the A10, Brad, to win this league, and how many bids do you see this league getting?
So my pick to win is St. Louis. I have them coming in around 40th nationally. I originally was gonna go out on a limb and pick George Mason to be a last 4-in team and give the A10 2 bids, but the more I looked at it, I couldn't reason with myself. I couldn't rationalize putting this George Mason team over Butler or Arizona or Houston. Even teams that I currently have out like Ohio State or like a Vanderbilt. So I have George Mason coming in second and being like a 2 or a 3 seed in the NIT.
Yeah. I would agree. I have St. Louis number 1 as well. It's a bit of a cautious one given I do have concern about the spacing. I'm not a huge Travis Ford guy, but the team is just way more talented than the rest of the league. I think they'll find a way. I think this is a 1-bid league. I don't necessarily know that St. Louis is going to be a top 40 team. I think my gut feel here is that there's no team I would project as an at-large team right now. Do they steal a bid maybe because the champion is right on the bubble and then they lose in the championship game? I do think there is an interesting dynamic of, we've talked about the depth of this league. You might steal a lot of quadrant 2 games. Just every single road game winds up being a quadrant 2 in the A10 and just kind of build a sneaky resume that way if you have 20-plus wins. I mean, that'll be an interesting storyline to watch. But as of right now, I think this might be a 1-bid league.
Yeah, I mean, the problem with the A10 last year was the whole middle of the league was a minefield. Because these teams had talented players, they weren't that bad, but they performed poorly in the non-conference. So they were ranked in like the mid 100s. You know, they're when the fifth place team is going to be like 120th, they're good enough to beat you. But if you beat them, it does absolutely nothing for you. And this year, I think that whole middle is going to kind of move up a tier and kind of fall between 80 and 120 as opposed to like 150 and 200. And that kind of shift up, I think, will be enough to sneak another team in, whether that be George Mason or like a URI or whoever, a team that can kind of stack enough wins that they can compare or at least hold their own to a Power 6 resume. Like I read the Gary Parrish article earlier about the A10, and Bonaventure was 3-3 in Quadrant 1 last year. I think that a team could have like a similar slate where they go 4-2 or 4-4 in like these meaningful games, whereas teams like Middle Tennessee, maybe they only had one Quadrant 1 winner or like whatever they had. But I think that the A10's depth in the middle could vault a second or even a third team into the big dance conversation.
Yeah, that's really fair. I mean, I completely agree with you on all fronts there. Give me a dark horse in the A10. I'm going to go with UMass for this spot before we move on to other conferences we have to get to.
I'm going to go with URI because I feel like they've been discounted pretty heavily in the preseason, especially from other A10 fan bases. I think a lot of people are down on them because they look at the guys who are supposed to be up, like your Fats Russell, your Jeff Doughton, and Langevin. They're kind of looking at their stats and kind of using that as their basis for being down on URI. But these guys are going to be in completely new roles, and I think, especially Doughton, I think he's going to really excel as kind of the face of the program now that Jared Terrell and Matthews and Robinson are no longer here.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I've been kind of 50-50 on them. I've been like, I like their core. I'm a little concerned because they'll be young. So today's secret scrimmage gives me a little bit more confidence that they can be pretty good. So yeah, I mean, I feel pretty good about this. I feel pretty good about this URI team maybe sneaking into the top 5, top 4 of this conference. Anything else on the A10 before we move on to the Mountain West?
And then just in regards to UMass, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how all their transfers blend together, especially when Jury Baptiste gets eligible mid-year. I think he's going to be a nice complement to split the center position with Rashawn Holloway. And I agree that they're somewhat of a sleeper, but the UMass fan base is really bought in, almost like the Nevada fan base. But I think if a UMass doesn't meet their expectations of like a top 4 A10 finish, I think a lot of them are going to be asking for McCall's head after only 2 years.
I don't know about that. I think they're pretty confident that he's like he's leading the program well, recruiting pretty well. But yeah, I mean, I think fans always do kind of make the jump. I mean, this UMass team was bad last year. Like, they bring in a lot of talent, but you don't just win right away. In college basketball, I've been talking to some Siena fans and in kind of a similar mindset. They're like, a successful season this year would mean we're in position to win a title in year 2. And like, your coach started in May. Like, you cannot expect to win a title in year 2 when your coach starts in May with an 8-24 team whose 4 best players depart. Like, that's just not a realistic expectation at any level. I'm sorry.
Hey, I've been there too. I remember when the Providence year when Chris Dunn was going to be a freshman and we had Vincent Council back and Bryce Cotton and LaDontae Hinton for his sophomore year. I remember wondering why the national media wasn't having us on the bubble. I was, very, very upset about it, very concerned. And they were on the bubble until like the last game of the regular season. It was funny because that was back in the old Big East, and they started like 2-8 in a conference play or something. But the schedule was all front loaded. This is what I always talk about with these unbalanced schedules, where they played all like the West Virginias and the Syracuse's and all the top teams early, and then the back half they had South Florida, Rutgers, everybody. And I was telling my friends, Providence can make the next 8 games, and they would laugh at me like, "Oh yeah, 8 in a row," and they won 7 in a row, and then lost that 8th to a UConn in overtime. But they didn't realize the schedule was all backloaded, and we had Rutgers, St. John's, etc., all in that back half. But that was another one of my too long rambles. So you can take the floor here.
Yeah, let's move it on to the Mountain West. But it is definitely a good kind of. Those are all like the weird like things that you get the insight to as a fan that I don't necessarily know that like media types see because they're following such on a macro level that they you don't see that like deep dive of like what a team's gonna do and like how the schedule's balanced. So definitely going to be interesting to watch with some of these unbalanced schedules year in and year out. Let's move it on to the Mountain West. As I said, Nevada, obviously the headliner. First question before they're going to be favored to win this league. I don't think there's any doubt about that. They're going to be picked as a top 10 team preseason. But they lose by 18 today in Reno. Is there any sign for concern giving up 91 points when the defense was supposed to be better, shooting 5 of 21 from 3 when the three-point shooting was always going to be bad? Are those some of the concern signs we talked about as holding this team back for those to show up early aren't good signs?
Yeah, I think Nevada is clearly a top 10 team in terms of talent. The roster fit is always going to be questionable with Lindsey Drew out. They're kind of transitioning from this long athletic positionless style to now playing, if they're playing Brown and Porter together, that's 2 bigs, like a traditional style, and then with no traditional point guard. That's a funky lineup. And they were playing a very experienced team, one who we were both kind of down on. I know I had them in the 30s. So this could be, Nevada's, maybe Nevada's not as good, or they need to gel with this kind of funky roster that they have now, or it's Washington is a little better than what we thought. I think it's probably a little both. They need to gel with this new style, and then also I think it's important to have the perspective that if Nevada loses that overtime game in the first round of the NCAA tournament to Texas, they're probably like a top 20 team instead of a top 10 team. Maybe we'll find out that that's a more accurate spot for them. But I still feel confident in Nevada being a top 10 team despite the loss.
Yeah, no, I'm confident in them being a top 20. I don't know if I'm necessarily as confident in them being a top 10. I don't want to jump ship after one game. I think it's especially a scrimmage meant for hurricane or fire relief, which was the cause that was on display. This team is going to be fine. They're really experienced. They're really well coached. I just think they got to find. They're still feeling each other out. I think the problem we've touched on is this team has to either be really good on defense or much better on offense. They were really good on offense last year. We expected that offense to take a step back, but we had hoped that in turn it would improve that defense. And they got gashed by a Washington team without arguably its best player. Jalen Noel lit them up. David Crisp lit them up. That has to be a warning sign for me. But this team's still going to be really good. Like, they are still a really talented basketball team. I think it tells me as much about Washington as it does about Nevada that they won as big as they did.
And then I think moving on to the second relevant team in the Mountain West, that would be San Diego State. They're an interesting team. The more I look at them, the more I kind of say, maybe I should move them from the NIT into the field. They have a senior point guard in Devin Watson, who's a big-time shooter and scorer. They have the NBA prospect Jalen McDaniels, and then they have Matt Mitchell, who had a very strong and under-the-radar freshman season. He was like he was committed to, I think, Cal State Fullerton, opened late, and then it was like, will he go to Utah or San Diego State? Chooses the Aztecs, has a big freshman year. Big time piece for them long term.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited about that, about this core that they have, and they're trying to land Boogie Ellis and Jaden McDaniels and have one run at it next year where they could be like a Nevada top 10 team. But I like Mitchell. I like Jalen McDaniels. He's gonna be really good. I think they'll miss Trey Kell as just kind of a creator and big shot maker. But they have a really underrated recruiting class. I don't know how much this recruiting class will help them this year because it's a lot of like high upside types. But there's a lot of talent in this group that could get developed over 3 to 4 years to be really special. So I think Brian Dutcher's doing a really good job. Once again, I mean, how do expectations change? They win 9 in a row last season and make the NCAA tournament. Otherwise, like, people were ready to burn it down at San Diego State. It was, Dutcher can't handle the job. Like, why was he just handed it? And all of a sudden now they win 9 in a row and make the NCAA tournament. It's like this team's getting 2 5-stars next year. Like, the best thing ever. Ed Chang's getting a lot of hype as a freshman, so it's gonna be really interesting to watch with the San Diego State team. I'm leaning towards they'll be on my bubble to start the season. I think they'll be outside my field.
Yeah, I have them bubble. I think it's also, they were very close to advancing to the second round of the tournament. Took like a late Rob Gray shot from Houston to beat San Diego State. But the whole kind of parallel with Brian Dutcher and how the whole perception of the program kind of changed with those, with that long winning streak. This was a team that had missed the tournament the past few years. A lot of struggles at the point guard position. Two interesting things I wanted to bring up, kind of similar to URI, where they were ready to, the fans were ready to run Hurley out of town. That year, the first year that they made the NCAA tournament, they had a couple bad losses, I think, and they were headed toward the NIT, if that, and that would have been, I think, 4 years without a tournament. They were very, very anxious, maybe even 5 years. But then they went on this late run. They needed to win the auto bid to make it. That was confirmed by the selection committee, and they did. They won a game. The next year they win a game, and then all of a sudden, Hurley's like this rising star in the coaching industry when his own fan base was literally ready to run him out of town. And I think another interesting note, you brought Trey Kell earlier. I remember watching a game with San Diego State a few years ago, and Xavier Thames was graduating, and people, on Twitter, announcers everywhere were like, Thames is leaving, but don't worry, they have this kid coming in, Trey Kell. He's the answer at point guard. Trey Kell, after 1 year at point guard, was not good, but all the announcers were like, yep, San Diego State's having point guard problems right now, but don't worry, there's a kid next year, Jeremy Hemsley, coming in. He's going to solve all their point guard problems. Neither did. I think it's just like a testament to this whole, whoever you have, you kind of discount. Whoever's coming in, you kind of overrate, and then it's just a vicious cycle.
Yeah, and I think that vicious cycle gets blown up even more with mid-majors, because it's not just like, you can't just play it from a recruiting ranking game. You can't just be like, well, this guy's like an underrated recruit, so like you can't be like, well, this guy isn't like rated in the top this, he won't be a good player in the Mountain West. Like Kell and Hemsley were both high-level recruits, so obviously they're going to get a lot of hype. But then like mid-major fans could always talk themselves into like a top 300 level guy being like an incredible player for them, when sometimes that's just not the case. But no, I mean, I think you miss Kell as much for just his toughness than him being like a star by any means. He wasn't a great player, but he was pretty solid. I think Hemsley kind of fits in as like a secondary ball handler next to Watson. I could see like a Watson, Hemsley, Matt Mitchell at the 3, and then probably Narain and McDaniel starting 5 to start the year. Maybe Ed Chang fits in like that combo forward spot instead of Narain.
Yeah, I think Watson, Hemsley, Mitchell, and then either Chang, McDaniels, or McDaniels, Narain. Yeah,
completely agree. Do want to touch quickly on New Mexico, who I thought had legit at-large potential. They lose Jaquan Lyle. That's a crusher. But they do still have a few really good pieces. Keith McGee's going to play point guard for them. Really well-regarded JUCO prospect. They also bring in Vance Jackson, Carlton Bragg. Bring back Maluach, which is just definitely not how you pronounce his name, but he's really good on the wing. Had an excellent freshman season. And Anthony Mathis, the high-level shooter. So this team still has I still think it could be like a top 75, top 85 team in college basketball and be pretty interesting.
Yeah, Vance Jackson's going to be very good. It's all going to depend, though, on Carlton Bragg. I mean, if he can – I mean, he's not going to resemble a 5-star player, but, I mean, if he can become like a upper-tier Mountain West player, then maybe New Mexico can kind of hold form. But, I mean, that Jaquan Lyle loss was brutal. He was going to be, one of the best players in the conference. He was their best player, averaged double figures at Ohio State. Had always had kind of questions with his decision making, but I think, kind of stepping down from the Big Ten to the Mountain West, I think he would have been a star. Very, very unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, there's their second injury. We talked about Jontay and now Jaquan Lyle. I think those are our two big preseason injuries. We'll get a few during the season, but hopefully no more, because it is just brutal to see for these kids who spend so much time prepping, especially Lyle coming off a redshirt year. I mean, you spend a year waiting to play, biding your time, and then as soon as you're ready to go, you just destroy your Achilles tendon and lose your year. I mean, I think that'd just be really tough mentally. But I think those are the pretty clear top three in the Mountain West. I think Colorado State could surprise. I think they're going to be pretty good. I've heard a lot of good things about Chris Martin. They've got a really good front court, and Nico Medved can really coach. I'm pretty down on Fresno State. I was writing up that preview tomorrow, today. That'll go out tomorrow on my whole Mountain West standing, so be on the lookout for that. I'm a little down on Fresno and a little down on Boise. I think UNLV could be better than people expect. Noah Robotham, I think, will be pretty good next to Amori Hardy and Bryce Hamilton. That's a sneaky good backcourt, and they can go small with a guy like Chris Clyburn or Tervel Beck at the 4 and Shaq Houston at the 5. I think they could. I think it'd be pretty dangerous on offense. Utah State makes a really good coaching hire in Craig Smith. Wyoming is young behind Justin James, and then two really bad teams in Air Force and San Jose State to round out this Mountain West.
A player to watch for UNLV is Joel Nitwambe, who's kind of a late add to their team. He's like a point forward type, like combo forward, 4-man. He's a really interesting piece. I know a few high majors recruited him. Ultimately, he kind of fell through the cracks, ends up at UNLV. I think that there's questions if he'll qualify or not, but he's certainly a player to watch. And then another thing about UNLV is they have like 17 guys on their roster. Them and New Mexico State, which is Menzies' former school, are the only two teams that I've seen that have like 3 or 4 more scholarship guys than you're supposed to. I don't know how they get these guys to pay their own way, but hey, I don't know like the true benefits to having 16 guys on your team, but I mean, if it works for you, go for it.
It is a little weird. I mean, I don't get necessarily where
Duquesne too. But
yeah, Duquesne like oversigned, and they have a kid like who's like an academic redshirt. I don't know what they do. I mean, maybe some of these schools have like big scholarship programs for like academics where they can slide a few kids in there. I don't know what the rule. I know there are like rules where like recruited athletes there's only so many scholarships they can actually get. So that schools like don't just give them away. But if they're like automatic qualification scholarships, I think that's like the exception to the rule. Where if you have a certain GPA, a certain SAT score, things like that, you can get like an automatic scholarship, and then the cost would be so little to these kids that they might as well do it anyway. Or they're like very low income and get a lot of financial aid. So I don't know how it works exactly, how it all works out, but they do find a lot of guys. Tombwe, as you mentioned, he appears to be eligible. They think he can handle the ball like a guard and defend multiple positions. So he'll be an interesting player in the Mountain West. Anything else on that league before we move on to the West Coast Conference, and more specifically Gonzaga? Touch on St. Mary's and BYU a little bit as well.
Nope. I think moving on to Gonzaga, where they got the good news that Gino Crandall is going to be eligible. I think he joined the team fairly recently. This is a team that has probably, we'll say seven, like a very good top 7. I think Filip Petrusev could be that 8th, and then international guy Joel Ayayi. I mean, if he pans out, that's a really strong top 9. They have a senior point guard, former McDonald's All-American Josh Perkins. Have one of the best front courts, if not the best front court in college basketball, with Rui Hachimura, Brandon Clark, Killian Tilly. Consensus top 5 team. Is there anything else to really add there?
Not really. I mean, they're going to be really good. And we've touched on the concerns about their point guard play potentially with Josh Perkins, whether he's the point guard that can make you a national title contender. But they're dynamic on offense. They're really good on defense. I mean, they're super athletic. The front court's great. Rui Hachimura is going to be terrific. Killian Tilly's an underrated player because of Rui. I mean, this team's just going to be outstanding. If you were asked today, them or Nevada, do you take Gonzaga? I think you do.
Yeah, I do. I think that Tilly's being a little overrated by kind of the national media. He's a very good athlete and he can shoot the ball, so I can see how he's projectable as a draft prospect. But I think that people are assigning a lot more value to him. I think people forget how good Jonathan Williams was last year, and now it's proven now because now he's on the Los Angeles Lakers. So he's a legitimate NBA player that they lost. A lot of people are kind of poo-pooing that and kind of attributing that success, I think, more to Tilly than it should have been. I think more of Gonzaga's success last year should be attributed to Williams than it actually is.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. Jonathan Williams was really, really good. Like, I don't think people realize, I don't think people realize how good he was. I don't know if he actually made the Lakers, but I know he had a really good chance. He did make the Lakers?
Two-way, yeah.
That's good news for him. He definitely deserved it. Just a really hard worker, a really good kid. So this team's going to be really good. I think they could definitely be 1 seed. They could definitely, and they have a really tough non-con, which will hurt them from getting necessarily that undefeated run that we can talk about. But I think it'll help them long term to have all those tests early.
And then I've seen a few people have BYU as an at-large team. I don't see it. If they had Elijah Bryant back, then I would certainly be in for it. But they have 3 very good players. Yoli Childs is very good. TJ Hawes, excellent shooter. Nick Emery is a great offensive player as well. They're just missing that one more big time talent. If they had a guy like Elijah Bryant, then their team would have been kind of set up like Nebraska's, would have that kind of big core 4. And I actually would consider taking that BYU 4 over the Nebraska 4. That's no longer on the table, and I think BYU is a NIT team at best. I think they're going to be even a fringe NIT team at that.
Yeah, I mean, this team was not that good last year. They made the NIT. They lost 7 West Coast Conference games. They lost at Loyola Marymount. That's a pretty bad loss. They lost at Pacific. I mean, this team didn't just lose to Gonzaga and St. Mary's. They showed some flashes. I think they'll win 20-plus games. I think they'll probably make the NIT again. I don't really see the at-large bid hype. I mean, although you start to build an intriguing resume, if this team was, say, 26-8 with a win over Gonzaga, 2 more quadrant ones, say like at St. Mary's, and 1 non-con win, that's a Q1s. You got 3 quadrant ones, 26 total wins, pretty strong schedule. I mean, you can start to talk yourself into why it's not crazy. I think losing Bryant, I mean, Elijah Bryant was an 18-6-2 guy. I mean, he was really good. I don't think you just replace that like that.
I'm actually a little higher on St. Mary's after it came out that they destroyed Stanford. I knew that Jordan Ford was going to kind of take the mantle as like the new face of the program. Didn't really expect him to be putting up 40-point games, even though it's a scrimmage, so it's not directly applicable. But he's probably going to be their leading scorer. I think a couple underrated pieces for them. They got the top 100 recruit of Matthias Tass at the center position, but they also add Aaron Menzies from Seattle. He's like 7'2", 7'3", I believe, playing that center position. And then Malik Fitz, the South Florida transfer, very athletic 4-man who should give them a type of player that they didn't have last year with Tanner Krebs playing the 4. Krebs now slides up to 3, gives them more athleticism in the front court.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see this team and see Jordan Ford really and specifically. The question I have, how much will Jordan Ford play point guard? How much will they keep him off the ball and play Krister Zorix at point guard? Zorix, a redshirt freshman, played with the City Rocks, originally of Latvian descent. Had a really nice summer playing FIBA basketball. Also, another guy to be excited about is Matthias Tass. He actually played a lot in their international trip, more than Menzies, actually. So he's a freshman who could make an impact right away. This is a younger team than I think Randy Bennett's used to dealing with. But Jordan Ford will carry them, and they've got enough depth with guys like Malik Fitz, who could be a double-double type. Tass, even a guy like Menzies, as you mentioned, and Tanner Krebs is a solid player. I mean, I think the team will be fine. I don't think it's an at-large team, but I think they'll be a pretty dangerous club throughout the season, win a couple games they shouldn't.
Yeah, I can see NIT. They're probably gonna have a gaudy record, which will always help. If they're 29-4 or whatever, they could have no tournament hope, but still, be a solid NIT team there.
Yeah, NIT seems like the reasonable early season prediction. Let's talk about the Missouri Valley a little bit. Get into some miscellaneous teams that we wanted to touch on. Loyola Chicago, the headliner here after obviously the Final Four run last year. Clayton Custer back. I nearly said Clayton Thorson. I'm in football mode. Marcus Towns was the unsung hero, I think, of this team last year. Super athletic and versatile wing. Came over from Fairleigh Dickinson and made a huge impact. And then Cam Crutwig, the promising freshman big man, can really pass. Has a great post presence. Lucas Williamson was really solid down the stretch for them and will step in nicely for Ben Richardson. And then Aher Uguak, who is the highly regarded New Mexico freshman, didn't really get a lot of run there under Noodles Neal, and then transferred over to Loyola. He's gotten a lot of preseason hype. They also have a really good recruiting class. The big man from La Lumiere and Franklin Aguanane is a guy they really like, and then they have a couple of freshmen as well in that backcourt who should be pretty dangerous. I think I'm not sure if this is an at-large team. I'm 50-50 on whether this is an at-large team, especially with the schedule they have. It's a bit concerning to me.
Yeah, I put them at 57 nationally, winning the Missouri Valley. I think the top 25 talk is absurd. I mean, they didn't even finish top 25 in Ken Pom even after their miraculous run to the Final Four. I think they still finished at like 31 or 32. Last year, maybe you could make the case that they were a top 25 team, but they lose Ben Richardson, who was their best defender, I believe, and then Dante Ingram and Andre Jackson in the front court, which was one of their competitive advantages, where they could put out those two athletic front court players and go small, but not lose too much in terms of kind of rebounding and defense. Andre Jackson was like a 6'5", a very, very unique player who shot an incredible percentage from the field, despite he created more than someone with that field goal percentage would indicate. So those are two great players who were gone. I guess Aher Uguak could replace Ingram's role. I don't think he's necessarily the shooter that Ingram is, but they don't really have a replacement there for Andre Jackson, and they could miss Richardson's perimeter defense. And then I think a lot of people are discounting just how good Dante Ingram was as a player. He's someone who I believe went to training camp with the Chicago Bulls. He started on the Bulls Summer League team, which just shows the type of talent that Loyola has just lost. And a team like Loyola is not, that sort of talent doesn't come around too often. I know they had Milton Doyle, who was a two-way player with the Nets, but I mean these are not common occurrences for this program. Yeah,
I will say from the moment I watched this team just demolish Samford in an early season game, you could just tell this team had something about it that was different. Where some teams just play better than their talent all year because of chemistry or because of they're playing running really good offense. They play together well. I mean, like the Northwestern team, there was a magic about it, similar to the Northwestern team that made the NCAA tournament a couple years ago. That team was special, and I don't know. Will this team just have that extra special aspect to it? It was almost impossible to quantify what it was, but Porter Mosher talked a lot about the culture of that team. They just played for one another, and I mean, it sounds all like coach speak, but I really think it was impactful to this team. And how do you follow it up, I think, is one of the bigger questions with this club. Jackson was super important because they could go – they had two looks, basically. Cam Crutwig – when Cam Crutwig was in, his usage was really high. They played through him a lot in the post. When he wasn't in the game, they could play Jackson at the 5, play pretty much 5 out. Jackson was also a high-usage guy. But they run excellent offense. They screen, they cut. Clayton Custer is really good. I think Clayton Custer's actually gotten a little overrated in this process because with a lot of teams you feel like you want to label one player like the star. I feel like Custer, he's outstanding. Like, don't get me wrong, great shooter, runs a team, competes. He's everything you want in a point guard. But I think he got overrated because we want to attribute success to one guy, and he's the point guard. He's the face of this team. he's all over the billboards, and like I think you discount a Cam Crowley, you discount Marcus Towns a little bit for what they were. So and this team's still going to be really good. I just don't know if it's an outliers team.
And then moving on to the team that a lot of people have winning the league, Illinois State. I just don't think that they're better than Loyola, especially if Malik Yarborough is going to miss an extended amount of time. This team isn't anywhere close. But I mean, they have a good experienced core. That big three of Keyshawn Evans at the 1, and then Yarborough at the 4, Fain at the 5. That's very good. I think they'll be an NIT caliber team if Yarborough is there. They can push for that top spot. I would still take Loyola myself.
Yeah, it looks like Yarborough will be there. There's also concern about a Keyshawn Evans, I believe, a foot injury that could keep him out until maybe December 1st. But that's huge when you're talking about at-large potential. I don't see this as an at-large level team. I've kind of cooled on them a little bit. I mean, how much does running it back with Malik Yarborough, Keyshawn Evans, and Phil Fain from an 18 and 15 team make you an at-large team? I don't know that I see it. I will just kind of point out, similar to George Mason, where we did the thing, where we're looking for that thing, that guy who could put them over the top. They did lose a pair of guys who were expected to potentially be that guy. One being Elijah Clarence. He went pro after a massive FIBA tournament this summer, which was unfortunate. He could have been like that 2-guard, very athletic scorer. And they also lost Abdu Njai, who had some high major looks. He was a guy who could have stepped into the front court, play Yarborough like the 3, play Njai next to Phil Fain. He has to sit out this year for academics. But one guy who sat out last year should be pretty good for them. Maybe be a piece that puts him over the top. Zach Copeland was a JUCO player, one of the top 50 JUCOs in the class. They expected a lot out of him, and it didn't pan out because I believe he had the redshirt for academics was the cause of that one. So that's certainly he could be a guy who helps him take the next step. I think this goes to like a 23-win NIT team instead of a 18-win CBI team.
Yeah, I think that the loss of Clarence was pretty huge. You know, if let's say he was their starting shooting guard, you know, you mentioned that he played very well this summer in the FIBA International Tournament. You know, maybe he makes a big jump, gives them another scorer in the backcourt, and then maybe now we're talking in terms of Illinois State being an at-large team without him. I think that they're just one piece away from being the favorite in the Mountain West. I mean, in the Missouri Valley, excuse me. Then the other team that you could make an argument for, I guess, would be Southern Illinois. A lot of people didn't realize that they were a solid team last year. I think borderline top 100. They bring back almost everybody, if not everybody. I think at least like the top 5 or 6. Marcus Bartley, former St. Louis player, running the point. This is a very solid team.
Yeah, they're very solid. I don't know if they have the just overall talent level to win the Valley with 2 teams ahead of them in Illinois State and Loyola Chicago. It's interesting. I mean, Barry Hinson has done okay there. I mean, this is a program in the last few years under Hinson. They went 20-13 last year, or that 17-16, 22-10 in 2015-16 before. After 3 tough years to start his tenure, I think those early 3 bad years kind of soured him on to that fan base that expects a lot from that run in the mid 2000s with Chris Lowry and Matt Painter and Bruce Weber running that program. And then Chris Lowry really fell off after getting that team to a 4 seed at one point in the NCAA tournament. But there was a statement from the athletic director that was basically like, we are putting every single resource towards making this an NCAA tournament team, and like nothing else will be accepted. So it could be like a Paul Lusk situation. This seems really old, where if you don't make the NCAA tournament, at least like come really, really close, probably. So at least so content, like be in like at least the top 75 RPI, get an NIT bid. I think Barry Hinson will be looking for a new job. There has been a lot of talk about one of Loyola's assistants who is actually went to this played at Southern Illinois, I believe. I'm pulling up the name right now. I believe it's Coach Brian Mullins. He has a brother who coaches at Illinois State, which is why I'm checking myself here to make sure it's Brian, who is the assistant. Yes, it is Brian Mullins. He's associate head coach, a really good recruiter. So he's a guy who could be in the mix if that job were to open. Although it is tough to say what will happen at that job.
Yeah, and I think putting all your eggs in the auto bid basket, I mean, that's not a very logical way to evaluate your team or your program. I mean, so Southern Illinois could be a top 50 team. They could go 28-5, and they could lose in the Missouri Valley Championship to Illinois State, head to the NIT, and then they're going to fire their coach. I mean, that's just a very strange way of doing business. I think that they'll be probably top 80, puts them on the NIT bubble, probably third in the Valley, but that gives them a nice shot at winning Arch Madness, and maybe the chips fall their way and they get in. Who knows? Auto bids, crazy.
I completely agree. I think so much gets made of auto bids, and it's like, ooh, like 3 wins in March all of a sudden, changes the game. I don't know that it should. I do have one Twitter update. The Nevada fans are now spinning their loss today that the 2003-2004 Sweet 16 team lost to a D2 school in an exhibition. So it's okay, guys. It's okay they got hammered by Washington. Do not worry. They're fine.
I mean, whatever helps them. I've done plenty of spin zones myself.
I think Bradley will be pretty good in the Valley this year. Sneaky good. I think Valpo has a chance to be pretty solid. I think the league's back on the rise after a couple tough years. Northern Iowa brings in a top 100 recruit at point guard. Their offense has been putrid the last 2 years, so anything will help there.
Yeah, Brian Wardle he had a very nice run at Green Bay where he had Alec Brown and Kiefer Sykes, both who had cups of coffees in the NBA. He made what looked on the surface to be a lateral at best move to Bradley, but it looks like he's rebuilt the Bradley program, and after doing what he did at Green Bay and now at Bradley, I think he certainly should be on the short list for a Midwest bigger job.
Yeah, I feel like he's got to get to an NCAA tournament. He didn't do so at Green Bay. He had a couple of teams that were really good and couldn't take that next step. I don't know. I wonder about kind of the talent level of these Bradley teams. He built them from 5 wins to 20 in 3 years, which is pretty impressive. But I don't know that these teams are this like high Missouri Valley talent level. So if he can start to recruit at a slightly higher level, maybe grab an NCAA tournament, but he can definitely be in the mix for maybe a Big Ten job. Iowa's a job that I don't know how soon it'll open. I mean, Fred McCaffrey, I think, has done a better job than some people give credit for, but had a really tough year last year. His buyout's really high, but you never know where money can come from. I mean, if that job opens, I don't know who'd be candidates, but I think Wardle, if he could get to an NCAA tournament, would be a pretty enticing candidate. Candidate at a program like that, especially given kind of the challenges of hiring a good coach at Iowa.
I think he should be on people's short list even without an NCAA tournament. I mean, just you mentioned the 5 wins to 20 wins, and then what he did at Green Bay, building good teams there. I think that DePaul could certainly open up. I think if Marquette doesn't make the NCAA tournament, it could certainly open up too. That would be a very disappointing season for the Golden Eagles. I believe he played at Marquette. He was in the mix when they hired Wojo. The first time around when he was still at Green Bay, so we'll see if maybe something opens up there.
Yeah, I completely agree. He did play at Marquette. He was pretty good there, actually. I will generally say that it is a tough spin zone to a fan to hire a coach who, I mean, he's 38 and 60 in his time at Bradley right now. That'll improve this year, but that's a 20-10 year. That like 58 and 70. I mean, that's still a toughish sell, but I mean, we'll see. I think he's a really good coach. I think it's just a tough sell with that bid. So we'll see. Well, I mean, he coaches a great defense. I will say that his Bradley team are really solid defensively. They were a really good player in Elijah Childs, who's a sophomore this year, and Darrell Brown as well. So future certainly bright in Peoria. Anything else on the Valley before we just kind of whip around to as many of these good one-bid league teams as we can before we wrap this thing up?
No, I think we should move on to Western Kentucky, who is the odds-on favorite in Conference USA. They get Charles Bassey, top 5 recruit in 2019, right? And then he reclassifies to 2018. Should be the starting center for Western Kentucky. Also add Deshaun Murray from Auburn, the grad transfer. Excellent defender, undersized foreman, average double figures in the SEC. One of, if not the most underrated addition of the offseason. Tavion Hollingsworth had a big freshman year. Should slide in at that 2 guard. Interesting note, though, Lamonte Bearden is suspended, or he's, I think, academically ineligible for the first semester. And that is a big deal because, we've kind of touched on this concept a few times already, but these mid-major teams, they get their quadrant one or like their big win opportunities the first half of the season, where most Power 6 teams get their opportunities in the second half of the season. And what this means is Western Kentucky needs to do their business early, and they won't have the starting point guard in the most crucial time.
It'll be really interesting because they're going to play Josh Anderson at point guard for that first half of the year. That's the report out.
And not Banton?
That the report right now, I mean, Rothstein projected it, and he said specifically in a tweet, Josh Anderson's play at point guard will be like key. So it sounds like they're going to go with him and then bring Banton off the bench. I mean, Banton didn't arrive till fall class start, so that's definitely a bit of a challenge. But yeah, I mean, Anderson's really athletic. I don't know how much of a point guard he really is. But if you were to go with like an Anderson, Hollingsworth,
Savage,
yeah, probably Savage, who can really shoot the ball, and then your 2 bigs and Murray and Bassey. I mean, that team has so much athleticism, so much high major talent. I wish you had more ball handlers. I mean, we've talked about enough. Every time a team with like a bad point guard situation comes in, I keep having to like check myself because when I'm like, oh, they don't have a point guard, they'll be bad. I have to like make sure I check the roster because I'm so in on a team that doesn't have a point guard this year in Northwestern. But when you're playing like all secondary type ball handlers, not guys you want like really running a pick and roll, like Josh Anderson, we don't know how he'll look in that role. Savage more of like a shooter. So it'll be interesting. I mean, Anderson's so talented. I mean, if he can do that, I mean, that changes the game with this team. I almost would play him over Bearden if he can play that role because, I mean, he's so athletic. I mean, he'll switch 1 through 4. I mean, if he can play point guard, I mean, I would just stick with him and bring Bearden off the bench with the shiftiness.
So then I have Western Kentucky, 35th nationally, puts them as a 9 seed. Where do you have these guys nationally about?
I have them in the top 40. I would say like 35. I think they're really good. I think they're a clear out-large team. The question is, if Bearden's out, can they build the resume? I will say the Conference USA is experimenting with the like late season scheduling to make sure there's a lot of games against those top 4 teams. At least you can see whether those teams beat each other up as a result, or if they make each other's resumes better. But you could possibly see a scenario where you get 2 quadrant 1 opportunities in late February with like road games against top 75 teams because Marshall will be top 75, really should be. Old Dominion could be in that mix. North Texas is really good. So that'll be an interesting thing, plus the conference tournament. So a chance to maybe add like 2 to 3 extra quadrant 1 games late that you might not have had otherwise.
I'm not as familiar with the middle of Conference USA as maybe I should. Texas San Antonio and UAB, are they top 150, top 125, or is that too high? I thought I've seen some kind of height from them.
I would say like the 6 through 9 range, like Louisiana Tech for them in that mix as well. I mean, they should stay above 175, but I don't think they sneak into the quadrant 2 135 on the road. UAB pushed Georgia in a really sloppy game in an exhibition. UAB is going super athletic, trying to force a lot of turnovers. Zach Bryant's really good. They could be kind of a dark horse, but it kind of goes into like the A10 problem last year where there's so many minefields where it's like a good enough team to beat you, but not good enough to actually help your resume in any capacity.
And I like this Old Dominion team. I've seen a little bit of them over the years. I like BJ Stith and Ahmad Caver. If Randy Haynes was just back, I was pretty sure Verbal Commits had Haynes being a senior this year, which was incorrect. If they had Haynes back, this team could have pushed Western Kentucky. I think at least been a top 75 team. Or if they brought Trey Porter back, who grad transferred to Nevada. At center, they'll be going, it looks like, with Elbert Robinson, who is a former top 60 recruit who is at LSU, has done little to nothing in his college career. They also are looking to get a waiver for Dejor Dickens, and based on the precedent, they should get it. I mean, Dickens was at Providence last year, played 4 games, and then was out the rest of the season with a back injury. And then he's going back to his home state of Virginia. So all those factors in, he could be a nice piece for them. I saw him play a couple times at Providence in their preseason games, and then the limited minutes he had early on in the season. He's fairly mobile for a 7-footer, very good shot blocker. Was a little lost on defense, but with maybe more consistent minutes, he could be a very nice piece in Conference USA, former top 125 recruit.
Yeah, Dickens fits more of the mold of Jontay Porter than Robinson, who really struggled.
Oh yeah.
Robinson did get there was reports of Robinson criticizing Johnny Jones for not handling him well. So maybe it changed before Will Wade got there. So perhaps a change in scenery was all that it took for him. He could be a nice surprise. BJ Stith in his 15th year of college basketball, between him and the two Stiths, BJ and Brandon, have been in college since I remember watching college basketball. I mean, I don't know how they're still playing, but they're pretty good. They also add Justice Kithcart, who I believe transferred him from Pitt, one of those, Pittsburgh. He was one of those guys who came in as a Stallings recruit and wasn't very good and transferred. So he could be an interesting piece in the backcourt.
Yep. Kithcart was also a top 125-ish recruit. And it's funny because I hadn't really put this together, but Robinson and Dickens are the exact opposite in terms of archetype. Robinson's your Joshua Smith, your Rashawn Holloway, you're 6'10", 300 pounds. And then Dickens is 7 foot, 220. So we got the lanky, skinny shot blocker, and then the low post, kind of interior bruiser. It's a funny dichotomy.
Yeah, no, it is a very odd. Robinson's gonna be interesting. Their skills aren't really transferable in terms of a substitution pattern where you can play guys 20 and 20. So, which is the easy way of handling center minutes. So it'll be interesting to see. It's not like point guards where we only use one point guard at the time. If you want to use multiple point guards on the floor, you've run through this whole thing where if you're splitting your point guard minutes 20-20, you're not actually have good point guard play. It's not the same with centers. With centers, you want a platoon, I think, ideally, unless you have one stud.
Yep, and then I think, should we move on to the kind of specific teams from the definite one bid leagues that we want to touch on?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, so I'll start. I'll start with Buffalo, a team I think could sneak into the top 50. They obviously lose Wes Clark, which is a big loss, but they have Devontae Jordan who can step in, who has played a lot of point guard, played a lot of minutes in his career. They also bring back a big three of sorts in C.J. Massenberg, Nick Perkins, the skilled center, and then one of my favorite mid-major players, Jeremy Harris. He was a top, I think, 2 or 3 JUCO player coming into last year. He had a very strong season. He can really shoot it. He's a long athletic form man. And they also bring in 2 top 150 recruits. One is definitely in the top 150. That is Janethan Williams, who's an athletic wing who had a lot of high major interest. And the other, I'm not sure if he's technically top 150, but he is close. And that's Ronald Segu, who is the point guard of the future. And, they have a strong veteran starting lineup, and then bringing those 2 skilled freshmen off the bench, that's a really strong top 7.
Yeah, they're going to get really small. There's a lot of – they don't have a true point guard unless they play Segu right away, which I don't think they're going to do. I think they're going to go with Devontae Jordan and Dante Carruthers at the 1 and 2, 2 combo guards, and then play Massenberg, who can handle the ball, and then Harris is a small 4, which is basically a 4-guard look, and then Perkins at the 5. They don't have as much flexibility to go big as they did last year. They had a kind of Smart who would start games and then come off the bench for much of it with Perkins at the 5. Perkins was actually a 6-man last year. It's just kind of a weird wrinkle to keep him out of foul trouble. But they do lose a little bit of that flexibility, which is just always a bit of a concern with especially a team trying to beat high majors. But last year they just schemed around DeAndre Ayton, knowing they couldn't handle him. So I really love Nate Oates. They recruit well, as you mentioned, with a guy like Williams, who's the future. And it's the perfect. They've done a great job doing the look ahead game and making sure you're planned out where there's not going to be a big drop off after this year. I mean, they're going to be really good this year, and then they're going to lose Massenberg, Perkins, and Harris. I mean, Harris might get a two-way. I mean, he has like a 3-and-D mold, but like they'll have Segu and Jonathan Williams, who will be your two kind of program building blocks. They have two guys they brought in on sit one, play ones, Gabe Grant from Houston and Antoine Jackson from Middle Tennessee State, who averaged like 10 a game there. They'll have Devontae Jordan for one more year that year. So like they'll have still like a core to be a top 4 MAC team, possibly even win the league. So that's always my sign of good coaching when they're like managing the roster. He knows he has the core he needs. So instead of like going out and getting a bunch of grad transfers who aren't really going to pull, who are just kind of like fill the end of your bench and then need a huge class the following year, he just loads up with those transfers they can continue the ride the wave of success.
Yeah, the sit one, play one transfer is very underutilized. You can only really use it in like specific circumstances. I remember the one that really sticks out to me from a few years ago was Arizona getting Ryan Anderson. I think they had Aaron Gordon, who was a one and done, and then Ryan Anderson steps in for his final year. They get a guy who is one of the better players in the ACC at Boston College. Kind of fits the role and kind of bridge the gap between big time prospects there at Arizona. I know Iowa State is doing it now with Mariel Shayok, which that was a great way of getting a very talented player who had only had 1 year of eligibility, which scares off many teams. But Iowa State was in a rebuilding year anyway. They could take him, and now should be back in the NCAA tournament with Shayok being one of their best players.
Yeah, I mean it's tough because you're committing a lot to. You're committing 2 years of scholarship for one year of players that really have to be a guy you're confident that they can be a starter. You can't just take like a rotation guy and like a sit one, play two type of situation. You have to be pretty confident that you're a top 4 player on your team. It's a little easier to do a high majors where you're going to have a lot more like recruiting flexibility. Whereas like mid majors, you want to have as much like you want to have as many roster spots to take gambles on guys as you can. Take as many because you're going to have to cast that wide net and see what you can land. But I mean, it's definitely well utilized here. I mean, Johnson will be a nice 12 to 15 point a game guy. I mean, they took a sit one and a half a couple years ago. Buffalo did, and they wound up working really well last year, reaping the benefits with Wes Clark. So definitely something that I think some coaches should continue to utilize.
So you want to nominate a team?
Yeah, I'll throw out a team from my homeland of the MAC. Ryder's gonna be really good this year. Excuse me. They can be good next year too. I mean, they only have 2 seniors, and neither are like key players. Stevie Jordan. This team's kind of built perfectly for modern basketball. They have a point guard who can really pass the ball. Then all the multi-positional wings like Demencio Vaughn, Minnesota transfer Ahmad Hill, Jordan Allen who could really shoot the ball. They also Fred Scott, who's formerly at DePaul. So they have like this group of 4 to 5 guys they can trust on the wing, and then Tyre Marshall, who's just like a solid center, can rebound the ball a little bit. So I mean, this team was super young last year and still went back like very easily. So to me, the sky's the limit. Fun fact: Kevin Baggett, in his 6 years as coach, has never made it past the quarterfinal in the MAC, despite having a top 2 seed 3 times. So that's certainly some history he needs to break. But this team is absurdly talented.
Yeah, I saw them play at Providence last year. They were very impressive. Jordan Allen hit some huge shots. Frederick Scott was also very good, especially late in that game. That was a very impressive team, and one that I was hoping was going to make the NCAA tournament last year. They go to the NIT, but the sky is really the limit for them. They should be the clear favorite, in my opinion, in the Metro. Yeah. And then I'll nominate a team. Northeastern. They were sneaky in the top 100 last year. Lost to College Charleston, who was the favorite in the CAA tournament to kind of end their season. But they bring back some very talented players, and they've been very fortunate in terms of kind of getting guys who were at one point seen as high major recruits guys like a Jeremy Miller and a Thomas Murphy, kind of added them to the program. Then Vasily Puzika, who I believe was their starting point guard last year. I think he transferred in from San Diego. He was an excellent player, averaged almost 18 points a game and 5 assists. So this was a team that they played a lot of guys. They were pretty consistent, and I think this year with the losses that College of Charleston took, specifically Joe Shealy, who's off for the Charlotte Hornets on a 2-way deal, I think Northeastern can kind of step in and make the NCAA tournament for the first time in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, they're really good. They bring everybody back. Pusika is just so good in pick and roll, and then they just build that team perfectly around him with Bolden Brace just out there shooting threes. They bring in Jordan Rowland from GW, who is a really good, he's that undersized combo archetype, can shoot the ball. I know Siena wanted him when he transferred from GW and chose Northeastern, partially for academics. But the kid can play. I think he'll be a 10-point a game guy, so that's not going to be slept on by any means. Tomas Murphy could be kind of a breakout candidate. So I mean, this team's pretty well rounded, and they're really well coached.
Yeah, Thomas Murphy's a guy who, when he was a freshman, he was a top 25 recruit. A lot of people thought he was going to grow to 7 feet. I know when he was a freshman, people thought that Providence was going to go after him hard, and maybe he would be this next big recruit for Providence. He didn't really grow or develop as expected, but he had a very strong freshman year at Northeastern.
Yeah, no, he's pretty impressive kid. I remember talking to a coach who was recruiting a kid at Northfield Mount Hermon and asked him about Murphy. He was pretty high on him. He was already committed to Northeastern, so there was no shot. But that's a really good prep program out there in Massachusetts. I'll throw out a couple more teams that we want to touch on. South Dakota State brings back Mike Daum and David Jenkins, and actually pretty good recruits in as well. This is a team that really pushed Ohio State last year in a pretty tough matchup in the NCAA tournament. They lose a couple guys from their rotation. They lost Reed Tellinghusen, who is just a solid wing player who made some plays. Brandon Keys back at point guard. So I mean, I'm pretty excited about this team and getting to see Mike Daum do one last ride. It's always tough when those mid-major guys who were stars from day one become seniors, and you're damn, I've just watched this guy for so long, I can't believe he's already a senior. I'm kind of hitting that hard with Daum. I've just been talking about him for so long. It feels like he's been around forever, but at the same time, it feels like yesterday he was a redshirt freshman on a SDSU team that I think played Maryland in the NCAA tournament. They played in that same region as Maryland, who was playing Valpo. I'm trying to yeah, something like that. Yeah,
we kind of touched on this earlier, but with these mid-major programs, it's just one under-the-radar guy breaks out, and then you were just all set for the next 4 years. I mean, they've had all the success with Mike Daum, who was certainly an under-the-radar recruit. That story has been described often. He was playing like the auxiliary gym, and with the changes in AAU, the next Mike Daum's not going to be found, yada, yada, yada. But then David Jenkins, too, was also a guy who kind of fell through the cracks and was a big-time addition for South Dakota State, played really well in the NCAA tournament and the conference tournament last year. And then also T.J. Utzelberger, the former, I believe, Iowa State assistant with Fred Hoiberg, is their head coach. He is someone who should be on the short list for high major jobs in the near future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I mean, Otzelberger's done great. He landed a really good. He has a trio of really good commits in his 2019 class. And the headliners, Caleb Grill, who had a bunch of high majors. I mean, when you're pulling high majors to come play at South Dakota State, I mean, that's one thing. I think that's what makes that job tough, and why programs in the Summit League have lost good coaches like Scott Nagy left for a mid-major. A few other coaches, Jim Christian. Or not Jim Christian, Saul Phillips left to go to Ohio to replace Jim Christian. I think he was at North Dakota State, where you lose these, where just because the recruiting area is so tough that they lose these coaches a little earlier than they might normally. So good on them for keeping Otzelberger until hopefully he gets to a high major job. That's all you can really hope for at a program in the mid-major ranks, is just to keep them as long as you can. I think in theory after Daum leaves, he'll build the part, but then always, if he's got Jenkins, he's got Caleb Grill, the future's certainly bright.
Our next team I'm going to nominate is New Mexico State, who had a very nice year in Chris Yans's debut season. They have a few transfers. We touched on this earlier, like 20 guys on this roster, but a few transfers that really stand out. Jojo Zamora, who is a rotation player at Utah. I know there are these sit one, play one guys. And then AJ Harris should see a bigger role as the team's starting point guard from our Ohio State transfer. And then they have a big-time JUCO transfer that I've seen a lot of people are very excited about. Ivan Orico Ichea at that four-man spot. I really had to break that one down. And then Eli Chua, who's been a consistent starter for the past 2 years, came off the bench last year, surprisingly, but he should take over that starting role. He's a kind of like a physical, like rebounder, interior scorer type. I remember being very impressed with him when I was writing a New Mexico State preview. It was one of the first articles I ever wrote for College Sports Madness last summer.
Unbelievable the rise for Brad. College Sports Madness columns to recording a podcast with the great Kevin Sweeney. Who said that? I don't know. Anyway,
yeah.
strength of this team is this front court. Eli Chua, Ivan Arachia, I'm going to go with. I don't know. It's close enough. And Mohamed Chiam, who's also a really highly regarded JUCO player. Both Ivan and Mohamed Chiam were, I think, top 20 JUCO players in this class, and both took official visits together and signed together. So they could be a really impressive, like, three-headed monster up front. So I think it'll be interesting. They also have one guy to watch beyond Zamora, Harris, Bobbitt group. It is Terrell Brown, who's actually walking on from junior college. He got arrested in like a fairly serious crime when he left San Jose State. But he was pretty productive as a freshman there and had a really good year at JUCO. There's a chance he gets suspended depending on how his legal case winds up going. I was reading an article about it by people in Las Cruces about whether Brown would be eligible to play because New Mexico State has a rule. Like, if you get charged with a felony while at New Mexico State, you're ineligible. But he got charged with a felony before he got there, and then they took him anyway. And the athletic director said they can't rewrite rules to make sure he's ineligible. So a little shady stuff, perhaps. But I mean, Terrell Brown's good, so that'll work.
That is not the same Terrell Brown as the one who played for Pitt last year. If there was any confusion there.
No, Terrell Brown is still a Pitt, correct?
I believe so. Yep.
That's what I thought. I couldn't quite remember.
Oh, they had like 3 or 4 guys that said that they were transferring, and then when I checked on it, because I hadn't heard anything about their transfer news, they were on the official roster, or at least on the verbal commits roster. And then when the official roster came out this fall, they were on as well. Mainly Kene Chukwuka and Terrell Brown were the two that I remember off the top of my head.
How about we each do one more team, Brad, so we don't run this podcast all night? I'm certain we could do it if we wanted to, but we probably shouldn't. I'm going to go with UC Santa Barbara as my final team. Big West actually has a really intriguing title race with UC Davis, UC Irvine, and Cal State Fullerton, all legit contenders. But this UC Santa Barbara team has legit high major talent. It's being built really the same way that Eric Hasselman built this Nevada program. They actually have a Nevada import on this team in DeVeryl Ramsey. He's going to start at point guard. They also have Corey McLaughlin, who'll also have a nice 2-man backcourt of 2 point guards, and then Armand Davis comes in from Bama. They also have former Seattle guard Zach Moore, who was a 10-point game guy. They got him to walk on. That's pretty impressive. They also add some high major guys up front. Some concerns there because they're all unproven. Robinson, a D-hen, if you remember, bouncing around from Western Kentucky, was a 3.5-star recruit, went up JUCO, and now is at UC Santa Barbara. They also bring on a 4-star big man, Amadou Sow, who had multiple high major offers. They brought him from Prolific Prep along with Sekou Toure, who's an underrated long athletic wing with a lot of upside. So this program's definitely on the rise.
I'm going with Georgia State in the Sun Belt. Bring back NBA prospect DeMarcus Simons. They also get Pitt transfer Damon Wilson eligible. He was a top 100 recruit in some services. They have Alabama transfer Devin Mitchell, who's a sharpshooter. St. Bonaventure transfer Jordan Tyson, who was in the rotation for St. Bonaventure. I thought he was going to be a starting center last year, but chose to transfer pretty late. And then, excuse me, Malik Ben Levy on the wing averaged 9.6 points and 6.5 rebounds while shooting 41% from three on 70 makes. So between Mitchell and Ben Levy, they have two really good shooters to kind of space the floor along with DeMarcus Simons in that backcourt. And then they have a pretty solid front court. Jordan Tyson should see more minutes after only playing about 10 minutes a game last season.
Yeah, no, Georgia State's going to be really, really good. Brad, before we wrap it up, I have a couple superlative questions I wanted to do real quick. It's okay. We're doing them off the top of our head. So the first superlative, mid-major not named Gonzaga or Nevada to make the Sweet 16. Which team would you bet on?
So the highest mid-major I have in my rankings other than those two would be Western Kentucky. So I think that's appropriate to pick the Hilltoppers.
Yeah, I think Western Kentucky is a pretty safe pick there. Buffalo would be. I think I'll pick Buffalo just because I love how well coached. And I love how well coached they are with Nate Oates, and they won an NCAA tournament game. They'll be pretty special. About your favorite new head coaching hire in mid-major basketball season? There was a bunch of them. It's kind of an off the top of your head one, so I don't blame you if you kind of stumble on this.
Yeah, that's tough. I think that most of my research on the best mid-major teams, so they all bring back their coaches. Let me just here. Why don't you give yours, and I'll think for another minute.
Yeah, I mean, I liked a bunch of them. I mean, I'm a big Siena guy, so Jamie and Christian at Siena I thought was like a slam dunk. Mike Davis at Detroit, that coach was an absolute that search was an absolute sham, but it worked out really well for them. I also there was a few other hires that I was a pretty big fan of. I liked Ron Sanchez a lot. He's doing a really good job early at Charlotte.
If I could just interrupt you for 1 second, I think I have mine.
Sure.
Richie Riley, South Alabama.
He's doing a really good job. He's recruiting really well. That's a very fair pick. I liked Dana Ford is doing a good job at Missouri State.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Rodney Terry is crushing it at UTEP. That actually would probably be my pick, just because of how much early work he's done. Like, there's a lot of coaches where I love what they're going to do long term. Like I love Jamie and Christian. Jared Grosso at Bryant, I think he's going to do a great job. Guys like that, I think, are all really strong hires. But I think Rodney Terry has to be the pick, given what he's done early at UTEP, given pretty much nothing left and had to just recruit. Got Jordan Lathan into the program. They've got a bunch of good transfers, so it'll be fun to watch.
And then just before we close, I wanted to mention, just we're not going to dive in because we've already taken too much time. But I just want to mention by name the other mid-major schools I have in my top 100. That would be Montana at 62. Harvard at 78. Vermont at 86. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we missed over Montana and Harvard. I mean, Harvard I think could be a top 50 team. I wouldn't be stunned. I mean, that team had Boston College beat without their two best players. I mean, they're really talented. I mean, if you lined up those roster that Harvard roster with, I think a lot of lower end high major programs, they would be just right there. I think those rosters are very comparable and very favorable.
And then there were a few conferences that we did not touch on at all. So I was going to give who I projected as the winners of these leagues, just really quickly. These are 4 15 seeds and the 6 16 seeds. That's UNC Greensboro from the SoCon, Northern Kentucky from Horizon, Lipscomb from ASUN, Murray State from Ohio Valley, Texas Southern from SWAC, Radford from Big South. I went with LIU Brooklyn in the NEC, and NC Central in the MEAC, BU in the Patriot, and then Stephen F. Austin in the Southland.
Yeah, I'll just run through some of the conferences we didn't really touch on too much. American East, I had Vermont, Vienna, you just mentioned them. So Lipscomb in the ASUN. I have Radford in the Big South, Montana in the Big Sky. Horizon League, Wright State, I think they're going to be pretty good. Just trying to make MEAC, I picked, trying to remember, Bethune-Cookman, they're going to be pretty good. Northeast Conference, I have St. Francis, PA. Murray State in the Ohio Valley, John Morant, they're going to be fun. Patriot League, I think I'm going to go with Bucknell to repeat, even though they're a little younger. Stephen F. Austin's going to be really good. UNC Greensboro brings everybody back from a team that had Gonzaga beat. I think we shouldn't have slept on them, but there's so many mid-majors, not enough time. SWAC, I'm going to roll with – I'm really debating. I don't know why. Grambling State. Grambling State had a really good finish last year. And then Sunbelt State, since I didn't pick those guys either. So those are my picks.
Cool.
They're on my website, all my conference previews, as you would like to see them. Brad, anything to plug? As I'm sure everyone's producing a lot of content this time of year as we get closer to college basketball season.
So I wrote the last team preview I signed up for at Busting Brackets, being Providence. Hoping to do some longer sort of slideshows on like a less frequent basis at Busting Brackets going forward. And then I have doing underrated SEC freshman with Blake Lovell at Southeast Hoops. First one on Chase Johnson, second one I'm going to tweet out tomorrow. Torrance Watson, that column's a little outdated. The whole premise of that. And then starting with Rush the Court, the Big East, doing major questions, like kind of short, quick hitters. So it's an easy read. I had DePaul and Georgetown to start, so that will probably be out tomorrow, I guess, if not Tuesday. And then, Kevin, I know that you've been doing all your conference previews. Do you have anything else that you want to plug to?
Not particularly. The conference previews are taking up quite a bit of my time. I will do a soft announcement on this on the podcast. I don't think it matters too much that I mentioned this here. I did write some team previews for the Belfast Classic, the tournament in Ireland with a bunch of mid-major programs for like their media guide program. So just like a little team previews for each team, like a little nugget on every club, why you should watch, what teams. So that's something I'm excited about that I just wrapped up this week. So that should be if anyone's making the trip to Ireland, you will see my work, hopefully, in some capacity. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you guys, as always, for listening to Pod. Find us on Spotify now. That is a new update. If you are a Spotify fan, listen on there. Apple as well, Google Play. Let us know, as always, in the comments if there's anywhere you are looking for the podcast and cannot find it. We will do our best to get it up there as soon as we can. Give us a nice 5-star review if you enjoyed our content. Hit that subscribe button so you're always getting the CBU Central podcast in your inbox as soon as it comes. Don't worry, folks. College basketball season is coming. Thanks for listening, everybody, and have a great night.